Hey, good afternoon. Welcome to Two Gents Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ron Spikes. Kind of adjusting my lights as I come into the show. I thought I left them like I did last night, but I see that I didn't. I'm missing one light that kind of helps me out a little bit, and I just turned it on. So I just want to say, welcome to Two Gents. Welcome to. I'm telling you, I'm out of sequence after last night, but I want to say welcome to Just Real Talk for Black People. Sit in your space. Sit in your space. Today I'm gonna start off a little bit different. And the only reason why I'm gonna do that is because as I sit in my space, I remember something that happened last night while I was doing the show because Byron was out and Pastor Riggins was out, and my grandson entered the room where I was. And when he entered the room, it kind of, I even said it then. I said, most of the stuff that we're doing, that we're putting out in social media right now, it's not for us. It's for that generation that's coming behind us that has to endure what we allowed to happen. And I say endure because that's all that Trump has been about, was enduring to see how long we could last. Because he's always moving the goalposts. He always has a different agenda. And that's not what sitting in your space is about. Today I'm gonna take you down some times that's gonna have you scratching your head saying, why wasn't this there? Why didn't nobody show it? And you're gonna go through a period of history, and you're gonna say, why wasn't this identified? Why is this not the told story? Why is this not in the textbooks? But some of it is in the textbooks, but it's told in a different way where it doesn't apply to you. See, you have to realize that truth is within those textbooks that we fight so much. But then, as Pastor Riggins, whose truth is it? Whose truth is it? It's their history told the way that they want it told and the way that they want it taught. As I sit and I looked at a video about Cuba about 2 days ago, and one of the things that one of the guys that walk around filming Cuba and telling you where it's at and the devastation that's going on since the blockade of the United States. And the reason why this ties all back to what I'm saying right now. See, Cuba is a communist country. You can go to it, but not by way of the U.S. You have to go through other means. You can fly down to Panama, fly to Mexico, do whatever you have to do to get a transfer flight into Cuba, and then get a visa or whatever you have to get when you're there. But here's what got me. All these videos I watch all the time about Cuba, and the thing that caught me the most was this. Their kids' education in their classroom can't be recorded. You're not allowed to go near any school. You know why? Communist country. They're gonna teach you about the communist country and who they want you to honor and who did what and whatever at an early age. So as you grow older, you have that in the back of your mind. And that's the reason why this show is so important that I'm doing today, because it takes you back to that time and it makes you understand that sometimes history can paint a different picture than what's actually going on. And when I started this, I didn't start with a conclusion. I was looking for something that I could talk about, that was written in documents, that was factual, that I could draw from, that I could pull from. And every time I ran across something, it was like it was a blockade, you know? It told one side of the story, but it didn't allow for another interpretation to be there. It was told in a way that benefited a certain group of people, And it was meant not to make them look bad, not to make them look in a dim light. And I mean that. I mean, when I get through with this, you're going to understand. You know, I started, like I said, I started with the documents. The documents led to institutions. And institutions lead to money. You know what the money leads you to? I want you to just start connecting the dots as I go through this. Money leads to benefactors, people that benefited from the documents, people that benefit from the institution, people that got money that led to them. They're called benefactors. And somewhere along the way, the official narrative asks us to treat each of those facts as unrelated. They're not tied together. But what happens when you ask them in a way where they're tied together, you get a different outcome. Because if you do your history and you don't tie them together, you're looking for one thing and not the whole picture. And the whole picture, the whole narrative of what I'm trying to get you to understand is how I got here. So my question is simple. What happens when you look at them all together? What happens? So I'm just going to sit in your space with me for 1 minute. I wasn't looking for conspiracy. I wasn't looking at conspiracy. I wasn't looking at it. I just want to know. Actually, I'm going to tell you where I started. I started this trying to find out how did the records get erased where black people became, where in native blacks became either Indians or Black Americans or black people or Negroes or whatever. How did all this transpire? And as I looked through it, I was looking at records because I was looking at people posting stuff on Facebook. There were records, there were true records back at that time where they showed where people had their names crossed out and another entry in on the side of it. It's not in the day like today in the computers where you can go out there and you can make complete entries, block entries, and enter that in. You manually have to go out there to each documentation. And somebody actually took the time to go through the documentation and back and draw a line through and write another race on the side of it. Intentionally. So if you're looking at birth certificates, if you're looking at marriage licenses that were filed, if you're looking at racial reclassifications, letters and instructions, and also court cases, families saying, that's not who we were. That's not who we were. That's not that picture that I got sitting up on my mountain system fell down from 3 or 4 generations to get us here. Where that picture up there represents our original people. See, you can hide behind paperwork. You can scratch out, do whatever you want to do and destroy it. But somehow between all of that, some of that documentation lives. That's not speculation. That's evidence. And I'm gonna tell you, when evidence starts pointing to a pattern, and you say, why do you say a pattern, Ron? Here's why I say a pattern, because y'all think all these GPTs are real smart. You think that all these AIs names and whatever name that they give them are real smart. But what they're able to discover that you can't get to in the amount of time that they get there is patterns. So when they give you an answer back, that's based on patterns that have been established. And they can get to it faster than you can. They can make it make sense faster than you can think it by going through all the resources, digging on the internet, going through whatever resources that's out there that's available to that whatever GPT, AI, or whatever source that you use, and they can go through there and get that data, compile it, and give you an answer based on the data that they compile. But here's the thing that AI and GPTs won't tell you. Before they even got started, they write certain rules in place. And if you conflict against that rule, they basically get stuck. They get stuck, or they give you, well, I wouldn't, and I just had this discussion this morning. Well, I wouldn't say it like that, but it's the truth. And here's another part of what I want to tell you about AI and GPTs. Now, if you ask them a direct question like I'm asking you right now, and I tell you, make a direct statement, let me just say it. The sky is blue outside. They may go out and do all their research, go through the weather channels and go different places and see somebody actually took a picture less than 5 minutes ago and say, yeah, I agree with you. The weather's blue. The sky is blue. But if you rephrase that question, just change the narrative one thing, even though they just asked you that question, they just answered the question 1 minute ago. If you say that Ron said the sky is blue, they go a whole different direction. They got to go all around. By the time it's over with, they coming back telling you, I would rephrase that, and I would tell you the reason why I would rephrase it, because Ron didn't say the sky was blue. I didn't actually hear it, but you just assuming on hearsay. But then it's your responsibility to go back in and say, you just told me that the sky was blue. I just put Ron in there, and now we got a whole different dialogue going on. So you have to be careful in how you ask your questions. You have to be careful in how you go about it. Or the information that you'll get back in return is going to be corrupted or wrong, or something's not going to be right about it. Then you're going to get out here and run your mouth at the beauty and barbershop, wherever. I got this from AI. No, it ain't like that. But anyway, let me get on down here. Why? I just need to clarify why I wanted to put the emphasis on using chat GPTs and everybody else, because you have to know how to ask a question. You have to know how to formulate to get an answer that's based on facts. And sometimes you have to ask multiple questions to get where you're going, because if you ask a single question, it's only going to focus on that. And if it's been having dialogue with you about being black and all the rest of that, it's going to take that into consideration of that thread that you're in. All right, I'm enough. I'm getting lost. Walter Plecker. A lot of y'all never heard that name in history. It's never been brought up to anybody. You don't even know who he is and what he did, what he was most involved in that probably changed everything that you're looking at, everything that you perceive today. Walter Plecker didn't hide what he believed in. He didn't hide it. He wrote it down. The state enforced what Walter Plecker insisted on, and that was reclassifying of black citizens to whatever term that they wanted, other than Native American. Let that digest. Other than Native American, because if you reclassify as Native American, you have a different set of rights than if they put you in a category that then it took all the rights away from those people. See, Walter Plecker during that time, it had a lot to do with that one drop of blood that made you totally one way. But they could have Italian, they could have English, they could have Irish, they could have Spaniard or whatever in their bloodline. Long as their skin color was still white, they was considered white. I'm going somewhere with this. So Walter Plecker is where the records change, where the records start to change, where the paper trail started. I'm gonna be honest with you, that's where it started. Then you ask yourself, if this happened, how? That's when the story goes, that's when the story actually gets bigger than one man. I have to let that sink in because see, when I just told you about Walter Plecker, I told you about his ideas, the things that he was trying to pursue, the things that he did. But see, Walter Plecker is just one individual. He couldn't have did all this and it just show up in one state. And he was from Virginia, just in case you want to know. It didn't just stay with Virginia. Other states around the outside of where he was began to pursue this same narrative. Why? Remember, William Plecker I don't even think he's in the history books. You have to basically Google him to put him in any of this. You know, but he initiated something that was so great against other people that's not his color that we need to examine. Because you see the pictures, you see the evidence coming out now where it was a lot of people that were Native American. They had dark skin colors. They look like a cool cup of cocoa. They had light skin tones. They sometimes when you look at pictures from history and they're in black and white, you can't tell if that's a black Indian or a white Indian. You can't tell his skin color because you look at him and you say that's a black Indian. And those, my friends, were the pictures that's on the mantles across anywhere that I think they call it the Trail of Tears. Those are the pictures that's on the mantles that's out there. The Trail of Tears started, and when it started, it's people that migrated out of it. It's different people that didn't make the full journey. And the Trail of Tears shows where those people went to. But it forgot to tell you that it left evidence as it went across. Those pictures that I'm talking about are showing up on mantles. People are going into their grandparents' paperwork and stuff like that and going through it. That box that ain't Nancy put over there in the corner that's been there for years. Well, some of these younger generations are starting to go through it and post it. Now, guess what's starting to happen? The dots are starting to connect. So I got to get you to where I'm at. Think about this. There was no internet. Investigative journalism was limited. It's almost like looking at an encyclopedia of your neighbors. If they don't update it, changes don't happen. Then you have to know to go to the update per year. Well, let me bring you back into where we at right now. The internet does all that for you. The same things I just identified, establishing patterns, will go back in history and do it for you. But if you're not seeing what you want, or is it not presented in the way that you want it, you have to challenge it. You have to go in and challenge it and ask questions to make it reason. And this reasoning sometimes will agree with you. And you'll get a different question, you'll get a different answer. See, the encyclopedia won't do that. See, written language won't do that unless you scan it in and then it's interpreted as digital information. Then maybe you could reason with whatever entity that you decide to use. But here's the thing. I'm going to go back to investigative journalism. was limited. That's part of the story that I'm about to present right now. Campaign finance laws were weak. Americans had little access to power. That included women, Black Americans, Native Americans, immigrants, poor people. They were not in the rooms when these decisions were being made, when these thoughts were being brought up by people like William Plecker, which you would never know unless you actually Googled the name William Plecker and what he was doing at that particular time in a particular state that was adopted by other institutions. And let me put you in a position where you can hear what I'm really saying, because even at that time, it wasn't no internet, but they had organizations that met behind the scene. I'm gonna get to those organizations in a minute, but I want to bring this up because I want to get you to where I'm at right now. I got something I'm gonna add to the stage. I made myself small. I can't get it no bigger, but I have it copied over here, and I want you to just kind of follow where it says 1691. If you see me looking off, let me do it so I don't confuse you, because I need to make sure that this is your center of attention, right there. So I took myself off the stage so I could do this. 1691 in Virginia, racial control in law begins long before Walter Plecker, that name I just mentioned. By 1691, the colony was already using legal restrictions to police interracial relationships. This is back in 1691. And define who could belong. Define who was important. I'm just putting this out here. That's what it says in the first block up there in 1691. This was even before William Plecker. In 1860s, after the emancipation, the racial wealth gap is still enormous. New research shows that the white to black wealth ratio was nearly 60-1 right after slavery ended. And that's 1860. Now I'm going to bring you up to where I'm at right now. See, in 1912, Walter Plecker becomes Virginia's first register of vital statistics. And you may say, why does that matter? Because that's where they record the birth certificates. That's where they record voting, anything that's going on at that particular time. And that's where they keep a journal of us coming into the world. It was more of a journal at that time. It wasn't a document like what you think. An individual birth certificate was printed out and all the rest of that. They didn't go through that. It was more of a journal that they used to publicize who we were. And it may have 10 or 15 names on that particular piece of paper, that each one of those names have a racial classification that they're in, and they use that. And now think about this. I'm telling you about William Plecker, William Plecker in Virginia in 1912. In 1924, Virginia passes a racial integrated act. On paper, it was about racial purity. In practice, it became a tool for controlling identity and excluding Black and indigenous families. Did you hear me? This was 1924. I'm trying to keep you up there. You see it up on your screen, but I can't read it from that screen. I have to read it from this one. So that's the reason why you don't see my face up there. I'm just telling you if you're listening. From 1924, I want you to listen to what I'm about to say. From 1924 to 1943, Plecker's correspondence and instruction showed the system at work. Families were scrutinized, reclassified, and pushed into categories that served the state's racial order. I really want to jump back on because I need to tell you something right quick. And I'm going to put myself up here and then I'm going to come back. I was in 1924. I'm going to put myself on because I need you to see my face when I say this because you need to understand. You heard me talking about being in the room and those different organizations that was out there was making the decisions for black people that look like us, for Indians, for indigenous people, however you want to classify us. I told you who wasn't in the room when they was making those decisions. Women, black Americans, Native Americans, immigrants, poor people. They wasn't in the room, but the decision that they was making was about them. Meanwhile, let me tell you about the institutions before I go back to that thing over there. Executive networks were the Anglo-Saxon clubs. They were everywhere. They didn't include nobody that looked like me. Anglo-Saxon. That tells you enough. The the Ku Klux Klan, better known as KKK. They was part of the groups, organizations that was out there. That was me. And you constantly hear me talking about political machines. That political network that's behind the scenes of all politics that's been going on since we started voting. And it's got refined and put into a better organization, and they got more tools to work with as we went through history. And it's still in your face right today. And I say I wasn't going to do that. I'm not going to do it. Even private clubs back then, fraternal organizations, Masons, Freemasons, not Freemasons, but Masons. Freemasons were for blacks, but Masons, they had chartered from England all the way to the United States. That's a good way because they only had the top of the top. The top of the top in the United States. Your so-called first president, George Washington, was a Freemason. So you don't think that those societies was able to correlate and get information out there to each other about what Walter Plecker was doing in the state of Virginia. It started in the state of Virginia, but then neighboring states started adopting it. And as they started to build, it kept on going. And it even made its way down to the South. So you know, what you ask yourself is how did they do it if they didn't have an internet? And that was the question that I asked. At that time, there wasn't no internet, there wasn't no way to communicate. The only people that were meeting in groups at that particular point in time that was able to communicate, Anglo-Saxon clubs, Ku Klux Klan, political machines, private clubs, fraternal organization, university societies. And you say, what? How does that mean? What was it? Because even today, in politics, there's a connection between universal societies that becomes part of that political machine that I'm talking about right now. I can make the tie because I'm gonna do it this way. If you went to a university, elite university, you retain ties to that elite university. And if you do something where it's recognized by somebody that you knew in that elite university, they can reach out to somebody else and tell them about this person, even though that person down here has never met, but they had the only tie that they had in place was that university that they graduate, even if it's just a graduate program. The reason why I'm telling you that is because that's how they communicate, and they're still relevant today. If you look at it, you just have to look for it. Don't think that these people are just showing up out of the clear blue sky and then all of a sudden they're a candidate. You have to look for that tie. How did you get there? What got you there? How did you get from where you was to where you going, to where you got to in such a short period of time? I'm gonna leave that there. I'm stopping short of saying everything that I really should say. Business associates. This wasn't a model world of transparency. They did all their dirt behind whatever wall that they was behind, whatever scene that they was in. Even in fraternal organizations, Masonry is just one of them, but it was an organization that could stretch and spread the word like anybody else. And think about it, they was doing snail mail, and it seems like their form of doing business was better than ours, and we got internet and everything else working in our favor. This wasn't a world built on relationships. And then the next question I had to have: what did these institutions put together to protect? I'm gonna go back over here for a minute because I got to come back to this, because this is gonna tell you a story that you don't see normally. And if it's told in a way where you can understand it, like I'm trying to do now, you can't. It's not hidden. It's right there in front of your face. So I'm gonna go back over to 19. Let me put it back up so you'll know what I'm talking about, because I don't want you to feel like I'm just out here. I want to put it back up, and I want it to be the main stage. So from 1924, Virginia passes a racial. I went past that, but from 1924 to 1943, Plecker's correspondence and instructions show the system at work. Now, I need you to listen to what I'm saying. From 1924 to 1943, Plecker's system, it shows Plecker's system at work. Families were scrutinized, reclassified, pushed into categories that served the state's racial order. And that's going to come back to tell a story in just a minute. Just kind of bear with me here. I'm jumping around because I want to go to 1930. The law was tightened further, folding indigenous and black ancestry into even more of a rigid system of classification. See, they don't teach you this in school. They don't tell you about these things in school. But I'm gonna tell you right now. I'm gonna put it out there. In 1967, now just think about that. Now, I'm gonna tell you why that's important, because I was born in 1961. So in 1967, this was still a part of what was going on. Loving versus Virginia finally struck down the I can't say it, but what it's basically saying is that it struck down that law. But by then, decades of records had been manipulated, and families disrupted had already done their damage. The damage has already been done. You done took away people's land. You done called it something else. You done took their names off the history of the deeds. You done scratched through it. They're not black. They're not indigenous. But this is 1967 when they came back to correct it. Does that tell you a history of how resilient black people have been? Let me, it gets even better. Let me just tell you. And I know this is going to affect some of the people that's listening in right now, because in 2001, Virginia later condemned the Racial Integrated Act. that recognized matter, that recognized as race, the recognition mattered, but it came along after the records and shaped lives were erased from history. So in 2001, they admitted all the way back to 1860 that they basically erased records and hid information from people that could have used it to come to have a fight later, even as far as reparations. But if they take in your history and they manipulate it, you don't have a fight because the records don't show. And that's the same thing when you go into these chat GPTs. If the records reflect everything that they took out, maybe we could have a fair chance in being a part of the history that's being rewritten at this time, but we don't have that chance. And that's the reason why. And today, which is the last one on that one, today the racial wealth gap remains deeply unequal. And that wealth still survives through land, inherited access, and those institutions that keep old advantages in place. I hope that I took you down a path that showed you they didn't want you here. They basically destroyed the paperwork to show that you existed and that if you had right to anything, they took it away at the same time. And you say, well, I know I ask this question a lot, but who benefited? Who benefited? Now I'm gonna go back to this thing because I need to get you on track. Follow the money. Institutions don't operate in a vacuum. The resources were distributed. They determined the access that you had to those records, which meant who owns it, who inherits what, who you married, because that's important too. Because if you married into money or you married into some access that was there, and you're the only one that's left other than the person that was there, that means that that's your property. That's the reason why that matters. Who qualifies? Who it belongs to? Who doesn't have ownership to it and what was taken away from them to get them there? And then they can go back and correct that record and bring it forward. You can't talk about reparations if it's nothing to bring it forward from, because they started destroying the paperwork back in 1912 through Walter Packer. See, what people don't understand is if they take your name and it's not a record, or they reclassify you as something else where they already know that you ain't going to have no rights after then, they give you a Negro name or a Black American, whatever name that they give you, they know that you don't have no rights to tie back to wherever you came from. That's the reason why they took that pen and went through individual documents and scratched out the name. It wasn't as you thought. It may have started like that, but it ended up being follow the money. And the next question you should be asking is, did anyone profit? See, if you've been with me for a little while, I told you the scenario in the beginning. The answer is yes. They profited off of erasing those records. Industries, institutions, organizations, individuals, they profited. And here's the problem, they're right in your face today. The assets stayed where they were. The wealth stayed where it was. The power stayed where it was. Like I say, the question should be who benefited? Who benefited? That's wealth beyond wealth. And this is where you get into the part that history does not want you to know. This is when you get into the part of who's accountable for what happened. This is where you get into the part wondering how come those organizations that I called out, like the Anglo-Saxon Club, fraternal organizations. I want to go back so I don't mess this up, but I'm gonna come back to that. The KKK, the political machines, the fraternal organizations, Universal Society, business associations. Oh yeah, they all benefited. They all benefited. But here's where I want you to follow the money. And it tells you a bigger story. If you follow the money, you find out who benefited the most. Who inherited it? Who kept the land? Who controlled the finance? And over the years, they continued to sell off what wasn't theirs, and their families continued to profit off the back of people who didn't have the rights to protest because you reclassified them. So they can't protest what you took off the books. That's where the light should be coming on. Because when they take you off the books and they put it in somebody else's name, then somebody can come in if it's taxes not paid on the land, if anything that they constructed, they can come in and accumulate the land. If not, just shooting you and killing you, hanging you, because they want ownership of whatever you have, because none of your relatives can come back and do what? Lay claim. Why? Because the documents were either destroyed or struck through. I'm just putting it out there. Take it for what you want. You know, what you have to ask yourself also is who and what entities sit at the choke points that control majority of what's going on in America at that time. That's where you start to find your answers. And again, I'm gonna have to disappear from the screen to show you the answers that's there. I'm gonna have to disappear from the scene to show you who benefited. And it's not hidden nowhere. They ain't ashamed of it. As a matter of fact, they call themselves the founding families, the wealth families of America. And you hear their names today. If you listen close, the Morgans. Listen to what I'm about to say. Just follow me, because I want to make sure that you see, that you focus on this and not me, because I got to lean in and my glasses are bad. I want you to focus, listen to what I'm about to say, because they're not telling you this history in books. The Morgans, J.P. Morgan, built a financial empire that funded industries like railroads, corporations, consolidated power, and controlling capital. What did I just get through telling you? The Astors were for fur trade, real estate, land, and speculation. Notice what I just got through saying. Land. Change the name, hang them, get rid of them, do whatever you got to do, and then you don't have no paperwork to support what's out there. John Jacob Astor built his fortune on fur trade, then invested heavily in Manhattan real estate and land development. One of the largest areas in America as far as population, New York City. You don't think that black people own land in New York City at that time? They did. But what they did was they took the black ownership of the land and they put a park on top of it, and they called it Central Park. That's facts. You can go out there and Google that. That's where the blacks had set up, and they called it, and they knocked it all down, turned it into park, built a lake around it, and everything. But that's a history that you don't hear unless you research it. But Astors, the Millens, banking, oil, aluminum, and industry finance. The Millen family built. Start to see a pattern here of land building wealth. As I call these names, the Whitneys, shipping, railroads, investments. I'm gonna go through these other ones quickly because I got to get through this show. But I pulled out these charts to show you that what I'm telling you is facts. The Vanderbilts, shipping first, then railroad. Railroad need to go through a piece of land. If they don't have that, they can't go through, right? So a lot of the times they just got a whole pot by what? Hanging, destroy the family, whoever was on the record, have a fight, get in a fight, go out there with 20 or 30 men, show up on the property and say it's mine. It's history of that too. But I'm just going through these names because you see them every day. Every day, they're still there. Carnegie's still, especially Carnegie still. Carnegie still. They have to. They use it through the railroads. They use Carnegie steel to build the railroads. Carnegie has to have a place to produce it. I'm back to land again. The names that we associate with wealth in America, the names we look to when they call out people with wealth, their ancestry is still living fine because they built up so much wealth and they controlled the banking system. Their relatives are doing just fine. I'm gonna tie this back to the modern day in just a minute. DuPont was responsible for gunpowder, explosives, then textiles, and wider manufacturing. You have company after Rockefeller. But anyway, oil refining, oil, Rockefeller built Standard Oil, a monopoly that dominated oil refinery distribution and global markets. And you said what ties this all together? And it's at the bottom. You might can't read it, but right before you get to the bottom, the fortunes were all built on control over transportation, raw materials, finance, and land. They were not just rich families, they were positioned at the choke point of the economy. By taking what he did and instituting it and putting it into place so it looked like it was factored in, like it didn't they didn't want that part of history to be told. It involved transportation, shipping, raw materials, steel, financing, banking, land, and real estate, if you control everything and your name is still relevant today, what do you think that means? Those names, let me let me let me let me see if there's anything else I should cover right there. No, it's not anything I should cover right there. Let me get this off the stage because what I'm about to say now, I mean, what I'm about to say next is gonna shock you. Because the names I just called still exist in society today. And you know why? Because they're called money. Old money. Old money. And the real reason why I'm gonna say this is because those people, the names I just called, and I'm gonna call them out again, makes Mr. Impossible look like he don't even exist. And I'm gonna call his name last. Morgan, Rockefeller, Astor, Millen, Whitney, DuPont, Vanderbilt, Carnegie. His name can't even be mentioned in the same category as theirs. And his name is Donald Trump. They look down on him. They look down on him. I'm just telling you, that's how much wealth there is in this generational wealth. The thing that the Black Americans are asking for is generational wealth. We don't have it. Our people are new money, but our forefathers and our people that was behind us had it, but it was manipulated away by the names that I just got through telling you, and they wasn't the smartest cookie somewhere. I don't know if it's on their end or if it's I'm telling too much history or I'm putting out too much information. But it appears I'm losing my video connection as I start calling out those names. And I guess they might have a program that goes out and reach out and get it. I'm just speculating at that point, but I'm just telling you if you want to talk about conspiracy, because it didn't happen before I called all those names in a group. I'm just I ain't the smartest cookie I ain't the smartest crayon, the sharpest crayon in the box. But if you could start connecting the dots and drawing lines from one dot to another one to another dot, it starts to make sense. Because in every one of them, it was influenced by land, and land has to have ownership where they have to create these bodies. And you can't. Mm, this is so clear in your. This is so clearly focused in your face that you can't even look over it. Those names are synonymous with wealth today. I want you to understand what I just got to say. When you call out either one of those names, they're synonymous with wealth today. But because they emerged from an era with extraordinary wealth and influence intact, the question isn't, did these people secretly control everything? No, 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 no. What? Hopefully you can still hear me talking because I'm to destroy what I'm putting out. I'm gonna continue moving because I'm about to go follow what I'm saying. And I'm gonna have to remove this one and go down right there. It's right there. I gotta hide because I got to put this up front so you can. I gotta lean over because my equipment is not that good, but I'm gonna come back up in a minute. How the power operated when records were controlled. Walter Plecker didn't operate in the modern world of transparency. He operated in a system that built on the exclusion and think about this. And I've been saying this throughout the whole process. No internet, no investigative journalism, a weak count institutions to people that to us to people that didn't have a whole bunch of money because we had to take what pennies we had to live on. In this environment, elite networks mattered tremendously. If you didn't have no money, they weren't worried about you. And you said, "What, Ron? You know, you're talking a lot, but what are you saying?" I'm telling you this: that they had something that was more valuable than what the internet is today because they didn't have electronic means to get it out, but they met in groups like the KKK, Anglo-Saxon, exclusive, fraternal, and social networks became their network, their internet at that time. Again, if we don't have a seat in the room and we can't put on a sheet because our hands are exposed, some of y'all will get that in just a little bit. We ain't in those meetings. Here's the thing. And historians that go out and look at the data, they can't be confident in what they're looking at because too much of it was either destroyed or drawn through or manipulated or changed. So they don't want to trust that history. And you can't pretty much blame them, but what's starting to happen today, and I'm at the where historians are confident. I'm at the point where today, that's where you see just above the puzzle pieces in the magnifying glass. What it's saying is that they're just starting to realize that over history is wrong. And you say, well, why is it wrong? History is wrong because people are starting to come up with those documents that they thought was destroyed and thrown away. And maybe somebody within that office or whoever worked for them did destroy the documents. So now they're turning up in people's paperwork that has been stored away forever. With lines drawn through it. See, you can't hide history. You can't. It'll never go away. And as long as we continue to participate and listen to our history from our elders, and then don't basically just throw that documentation away because it's just old stuff. We need to bring it forward because it shows a pattern of people manipulating rules to favor them, and that history may not change the outcome. They're all by themselves. That they did. It was some stuff that was done that to people, to a race of people, and to a group of people that had ownership, that their relatives destroyed to keep the money flowing. You know where historians and it causes GPTs and whatever thing that you're looking at, if you try to put the pieces together. You remember earlier when I told you had to ask the questions all together to get a correct answer? That's what they want you to do. Because if you ask one, they're gonna dispute it. If you ask two and it doesn't make sense, they're gonna tell you the same thing they told you on one. I can't see where that documentation is proven. I can see what you're saying is true. But when you start putting them all together and you ask a question that's relative to what they're looking for, you get a complete answer with those with that AI intelligence, chat GPTs or whatever you want to call it, however many names. Most of all, everything that you hear is basically just a doorway into information. That's all it is. A doorway into information. Anyway, I want to keep this going because what if it wasn't one conspiracy, but it was a line effort taken on. What if it was a line effort taken on by everybody that was there? All those names I called out, and this goes into what if they don't have to consider perfectly. They don't have to consider, but the only way that you're gonna find out is the puzzle. Is the puzzle like you building the puzzle on your table, piece by piece? It's starting to show up the history that was hidden. Piece by piece is starting to show up. Piece by piece, they're starting to get pictures of people dressed up that people have kept for years as a relative. They starting those pieces are starting to come together and build a puzzle. The real question is where were there powerful people in organizations whose interests aligned in ways that shaped the official record, national narrative, and were ordinary people largely excluded from those decisions? Maybe you didn't hear me. Because if you know those names, you know that it was a lot of people that wasn't sitting at the table like, let me just say like me. Like anybody other than any one of the names that was scratched out, scratched through, and destroyed throughout history, that it wasn't anybody at the table sitting there when those decisions were being made that looked like me. The answer is right in front of us. History is showing us the answers right in front of us. The historical answer is yes, these people are the ones that set at the key points and manipulated the system to benefit them, to manipulate the system to benefit them and their family. And they're living on trust wealth that originally belonged to, but you can't prove it because records have been destroyed, manipulated, or sanitized. But they got these big old houses out there with Carnegie, Morgan, the DuPonts, the Rockefellers, big old houses that maybe 40 families can live in. But that wealth, that wealth came from deceit, lying, stealing. I know I should be using bigger words or bigger definitions for what they did. Hanging, call it out, tell the truth. They destroyed the records they didn't just destroy them for general purpose. They did it for a reason. And the only reason why you can show that this history, why they benefited in this history was true, is because those names still exist today. And to take it one step further, you don't hear nothing about William Plecker. Where's the Plecker estate? You don't hear that. You don't even hear the estates of other people that was out there because these people were the beneficiaries of that. Because I realized these wasn't three separate conversations. That's where they get you at. They want you to hold 3 separate conversations so they can deny each one of them. People say, "Prove the conspiracy." I just told you. They changed the records, but the conspiracy, prove the conspiracy, it wasn't a conspiracy. It was a fact. People say that that's just institutions, but institutions benefited. Did they not? I just showed you every industry that in, and they had one common tie back to land that they had to occupy, but they stretched through the records to manipulate ownership. Or they hung you, and that's what they don't want to say. They don't want that out there. Or they killed you and took your land when all else fails. Or they showed up to your house with groups, big groups. Big groups could be just like the KKK. Big groups could be a group of men coming with arms and running you off your land. Oh, they show that on TV too. They show them white people going in and claim mines and they find gold on they claim or whatever, and they go in there and they take it. It is the same process when you take away land from people that owned it, but you destroy the records, or you hang them. I'm gonna keep using that. Or you hang them, or you kill them. Most people say, well, wealth had nothing to do with it, but wealth remained protected. They kept their status because they hired people to do the job that they didn't want to do. They hired people to go out there and do it, but their family hands never got dirty. For generations, this story has been told that they were the pioneers of America, that they developed America, that they were the backbone and institution of America. Their names are still relevant today. That's the reason why this show was called Connecting the Dots. Well, I had to rename it because I had to use my Connecting the Dots show to correct something else. And I'm gonna leave that alone because it's over with. It's done, and I'm trying to practice. I'm in therapy, y'all. I got my own therapy session going on. Well, I'm not going to use those two names. I'm trying because that's another system of manipulation and having wealth and power coming together to, you know what I'm saying. I'm gonna leave it right there. The questions wasn't simple anymore. They connected. And when they connected, the narrative changed. What if it wasn't conspiracy? What if it was structured just like I showed you? Segregation wanted racial boundaries. Segregationists wanted racial boundaries. I can't even pronounce this word, but I'll tell you this. I'm gonna try to pronounce it. Don't laugh at me. Don't do whatever you want to do. I'm gonna still get it out because it's true. Eugenicists wanted racial purity. Politicians wanted votes. States wanted fewer obligations. Let me tie that in. States wanted fewer obligations. And you said, well, why does that matter? Because the Republican Party is doing the same thing today that I'm telling you that they wanted back then. They wanted smaller government, so they're not responsible, and they want to put the bear of the burden of taking care of people on the states. Remember me saying? I'm gonna say it again. It all ties back. It's always something to what I'm saying. You remember me saying that people vote against their best interest? That's why this is relevant. Because it didn't start just today, it's been going on. The elites want stability. They don't want to lose what they got. They got this big corporation, they got those big names out there. No, they didn't want to lose what they had. Was it a time they probably almost lost it? Yeah. But somehow they miraculously recovered. And their institutions still exist today. We just don't see the names. Some of them we do. Chase. Some of the other ones, Astor, Millens, the Whitneys, Vanderbilts, Carnegie, DuPont, Rockefellers. Just calling out a few names. Exclusive organizations want the influence. They didn't want the necessary coordinate. That means they didn't want to get their hands dirty. They didn't have to. And you know why? All of their interests in them surviving was aligned. And similar interests often produce similar outcomes. Power of the few at the sacrifice of the many. So maybe the question isn't, was there one hidden organization controlling history? I don't think so. Maybe it's this. Were powerful people and institutions able to shape the official record while ordinary people were excluded from the decisions that shaped their lives? And the answer should be yes. The debate begins when we ask how it got coordinated, who participated, what can be proven, what remains unknown. The unknown history where people are starting to bring their records out and show that they own land, that their name was different than when they took it, or when they hung them, or when they killed them. To cut off the lineage from that particular land. I want to say this, and I'm gonna get out of here because I'm running up on my time right now. I didn't start this with a to show, because I got wrapped up in this thing where people started to show their Indian heritage and all the rest of that, and following the documentation. That's where I started this at. I didn't come in this to expose a group of people. I came in here I followed the documents, and it led to the institutions of people that I'm talking about, the well-known people that's out there. Everything leads back home. If you follow the money trail leads to the benefactors that still benefit today. Just letting you know. And somewhere along the way, the official narrative asked us to treat each of us, each of those as facts, as unrelated. I'm gonna read that again because that's so key in the whole thing that I'm saying. And somewhere along the way, the official narrative asked us to treat each of those facts as unrelated because if they together, we look at them together and pause. Then I'm not asking you right now. I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm asking you to look for yourself. That's what this show is about. Sit in your place. Just real talk for Black people. If there's anybody else out there that happens to feel like it applies to them, you're welcome to sit in your space. But the talk is going to always be about Black people. You know, the biggest question in the room that you got to ask yourself and that you need to do. What in the room with representation and who was the benefactors? And when you ask those questions, you come up with answers. You come up with names. You come up with names, all right. And they still exist today. So if you're out there today, I just want to say, I hope I took you somewhere. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you can see it and go along this path that I shared with you. And hopefully it opens up your eyes, because that's what I started doing this series about. Doing this about, I had to separate from wherever else I was and come to this platform in this medium that I'm in to just real talk for Black people. You can sit in your space and listen. And that's what you've been doing. So I just want to say this. As I always do, I want to say thank God, thank God, thank God. And I'm out of here. If you think this is something, come to Monday's show. I'm putting it up right after this. And my next show on Wednesday, a little bit more fire. So stay engaged. Know that it's coming. And again, I'm going to say this because we need to know what is said today, what I'm putting out there in the airways today, is going to be there for quite some time. This may not be for everybody. This may be for the next generation, but it's going to be there for some time. Somebody somewhere is going to get smart enough to ask the right questions, and hopefully they find out the right answers. Because if it's put into the media and it's put into the environment in which I'm putting it out there, at least they can go back and find it. I'm going to say goodbye. Y'all have a good one. I hope you was informed, and that's all I want to do is inform and let you make your own decision. Go out there and do your own research, find out your answers. And then you'll know. Out of here. Take care. Y'all enjoy.